Good evening, everyone. There's been a little bit of controversy brewing over the last few days regarding the customization mode of Soul Calibur 6. I've had a lot of comments and questions about it, so I wanted to make a quick video with my thoughts on the matter. If you haven't heard about this yet, I'm just going to introduce the issue quickly. We have the customization mode in Soul Calibur 6 where you can do two things. You can change the cosmetic appearance of an existing character, which is what I'm doing right here with Sungmina. I've just put some footage of me messing around in customization mode in the background because I needed something to go with the video. But you can also create your own character from scratch, and it has a lot of elements similar to an RPG where you can choose your character model and the appearance and all the rest of it. But for your own customized character to have a move list, you need to choose a move list and a weapon style from an existing character in the game. And this is where the issue starts to arise a little bit, because you can choose a move list and then put that on a character model that is typically not associated with that move list. So if you are a Tekken player, the analogy would be, say that you are taking Kuma, who has a very specific move list and a very specific hitbox in Tekken, and you put all of his moves on the character model of Xiaoyu. You can see how that might be an issue. Xiaoyu also has a specific hitbox. She needs to be comboed in a certain way, and so on. So not only does this mean that you have inconsistency in the competitive environment, it also means that you actually have the option of customizing for unfair advantage, and that is a problem in my opinion as well. When you give players the option of customizing for competitive advantage in these game modes, in my experience they tend to take that chance. And we have an example and an analogy in Tekken, a video I made a long time ago now. I talked about an issue I was seeing with Yoshimitsu in Tekken 7. Something that you can do in that game is that you can change the hit spark of your character, and it relates to how Yoshimitsu uses unblockable moves. In Tekken we have these bright sparks that happen when we connect with attacks. In Yoshi's case it's like a very bright purple light. And in the case of unblockable moves, that spark actually comes out before the move. The reason that happens is it needs to telegraph to the opponent that the move that is about to come out is an unblockable move. You can't block it or stand there. You need to interrupt it or move out of the way quickly, and so to give you a chance to realize that, they make the hit spark come out first. With Yoshimitsu, what you can do is you can change that spark from this bright light into just some items that scatter on the ground, like bowling pins and things like that. And so what happens is, if you're on a dark stage where that bright purple light would normally really stand out against the background, and you change that to some non-glowing items falling on the ground, it can make it much more difficult to react to Yoshi's unblockable moves. And he actually is one of the few characters who regularly uses unblockable moves in his normal gameplay. And what I'm trying to get to here is, when I play against high-level online competition here in Japan, most high-level Yoshi players are using that option. They have selected the hit spark that is more difficult to see. And so I think that if you give people the option of getting a competitive edge through the customization mode, usually they will take it. At least a lot of people will. You can't give people the benefit of the doubt here. While many of us feel that we want the fairest competition possible and just want, you know, a good game, and we want to win and feel like we earned it, a lot of players of online games are just really into winning. And I think winning for some people is kind of tied into their sense of self-worth a little bit. You know, it has to do with your confidence as a person, and these are the kinds of players who, if you criticize any aspect of how they play the game, their immediate answer is always just get good. You know, it's not something that I'm doing. The entire problem here is your inability to deal with what I'm dishing out. And there are many cases, it needs to be said, in fighting games where the solution to your problem is you just get good, become better at dealing with the things you're struggling at dealing with. But I think if you're able to customize and change your hitbox to make yourself a more difficult target, that is a case where you're actually getting an unfair advantage, and I don't think it is something that should exist in the competitive modes of the game. The reason I really wanted to get my more modest opinion on this out there is, I saw Eris made a video the other day where he called the online ranked mode of Soul Calibur, I'm paraphrasing, but I think he said the shittiest ranked mode of all time, and it definitely isn't, and that needs to be said as well. That's obviously intentional hyperbole on his part, so I mean you can't criticize him for just voicing his opinion. He's definitely correct in his criticism, but if you don't have years and years of competitive fighting game experience like me or Eris, then you might be on the fence on should you play this game, should you buy it, should you keep on playing it, is it worth getting into? And if you hear something like that, you might be discouraged to pick up the game. And so I just want you to know that it's definitely not the shittiest online ever. It's a very solid online mode that has some issues bleeding in from another game mode, a casual single player mode in the case of customization. But there are online modes out there that have such bad connection speeds that you can barely play. There are online modes where people hack into the game and make themselves invulnerable. There are online modes where you never get penalized at all for pulling your internet cable and just avoiding all losses and never taking a loss. And so Calibur 6 doesn't have these issues, so it's a solid online mode with some issues, like I say, bleeding in from another game mode. There are issues. They are issues that I want resolved, but I'm not as worried about it as some other people. And one other reason I'm not that worried is that I'm pretty sure that we're actually going to see this fixed. And the thing that made me sure that we are going to see it fixed is another thing that popped up the other day. I saw a gif of somebody who had turned their entire character into a huge apple using an item in the customization mode, which you can apparently do. And so when you turn your character into a giant apple, and that's big enough that you're kind of like in a big opaque circle, and your weapon is inside that circle, right? So your opponent can't see your weapon at all, and that's a huge issue. Having a slightly altered hitbox is an issue, but if you can't see the opponent's weapon at all, then that makes it completely impossible to have a serious competitive game of Soul Calibur, because what we do in this game is we watch the opponent's attacks and weapons to decide what we have to do next, especially in Soul Calibur, because the attacks tend to be slower and have more frames of animation than in a game like Tekken, right? So that makes me certain that it is something that Namco will look at. So I definitely think there is a solution on the horizon. It's just going to be an issue of what kind of solution they bring out, what the fix is actually going to be. We saw another analogy of that in Tekken, by the way. There was a bodysuit you could put on that was very dark, and it made it difficult to see what the opponent was doing. Again, you couldn't see their attacks properly, and that is something that they actually did fix. And we're talking about the same company here, so I think it's an example of them fixing a similar issue. And this one is even bigger because you can't see the weapon at all, right? So I definitely think the issue is going to be resolved. And so as for what kind of a fix it should be, I've seen a couple of different solutions. Some people say that we can normalize the hurt boxes of the game. So for example, if you're making an Astaroth move list character, then you should have the same hurt box as Astaroth. I think that can be very problematic to do. I mean, I'm not a programmer, but it's probably difficult and will take time to set up. And it's also the case that it doesn't really solve the issue if you have a small female character and she has the hurt box of Astaroth. That means that you would be able to slice the air in front of her, space that Astaroth's model would normally occupy, and hit her. So it doesn't really solve the issue. Your character model needs to be the same as your actual hitbox for it to make sense. That's the way these 3D games work, right? We don't really have hitboxes as such as you have in a 2D game. We have models, and the character model and the hitbox is usually the same, or at least extremely similar. Another solution is to ban customized characters from the competitive modes like online ranked, and that is a solution I can definitely get behind. I wouldn't mind it at all. I can see why some people who really love a customization mode would find that a little bit sad, because they've made these favorite characters from their favorite animes and whatever, and it's easy to laugh at people like that and say that they're casuals and they don't matter. I don't think that's true. I think we need both kinds of players for this game to be healthy, right? So I think a compromise that I think would make sense is you have all of these parameters when you search for an online game, 3+ connection bars, same area. You could put an option in there that says that you only want to play against other players who have not customized their character or have only customized the cosmetic appearance of the character. So for example, the Shaolin monk Sungmina that I've made here would be fine because she's just Sungmina with different clothes, but it's not one of those player created characters. The one issue with that is that it would limit slightly the amount of competition that you could run into. But I think that's probably fine, because if you are a competitive player, that means that when you do run into competition online, it's likely to be a game that you can enjoy. And if you are a more casual player and you want to play with your customized character, you probably don't mind that other people are doing it as well. When I say that I think we need both kinds of player, I think it's definitely true that, I mean, the casual crowd, they make up much of the sales figures of a game, and so they finance the DLC, the next entry in the series, you know, they make up a lot of the commercial success of the game, but then the competitive players are the ones who keep on playing for the longest, and also keep on advertising and showcasing the game by making content on it, streaming about it, you know, appearing in tournaments and so on. And so I think we're looking to get two very different experiences from the same game, which is where the issue arises, because being a person who plays single player modes is very, very different from being, you know, a tournament player who is trying to train for a serious tournament. And so there needs to be some sort of compromise, but I think there can be a very good compromise, and I think most people probably have a big enough heart that if they're sitting in the one camp, they can understand the feelings of the people in the other. But if I'm gonna, you know, come down with my own opinion here, I am more on the competitive side of things. I want to be a good Soul Calibur player, and I really care about fairness in these games, which is why I talk so much about roster balance, strong characters versus weak characters and stuff. So I want the game to be as fair as possible when I play, and so I definitely think the issue should be fixed. But as I say, I'm pretty sure that it will be. And if you are worrying right now, I can tell you that I've not run into a single player who is deliberately seems to be customizing for advantage. It might obviously become more prominent when people realize that it's something that you can do, but for now it's usually people who customize pretty superficially and have a similar character model or the same character model that they would normally have if they were just playing with a typical character. So that's going to wrap up my thoughts on the issue, and as always, I'm very interested to hear from you guys. But like I say, I am very hopeful, and I've gone from saying for a couple of days ago that I think this game is very good. Right now I don't think this game is very good. I actually think that this game is spectacular. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It is just such a fun game to play. And if you are worried and you are on the fence about whether or not you should get into the Soul Calibur action because of this customization issue, it's not quite as big as it's being made out to be, and I think a solution is on the horizon. So definitely try out Soul Calibur. I can't recommend it enough. It is an extremely enjoyable game to play, even in the online competitive modes. But for now, thank you so much for watching the video. I look forward to hearing your opinions in the comment section. I'll see you guys again in the next video.